Welcome to the Happiness Helix podcast. And today's guest is a very well-known media personality, Vasanthi Hariprakash. And for the first time, I'm actually going to be reading out an introduction. So Vasanthi is an award-winning journalist, radio and television personality, media entrepreneur. She founded Pickle Jar Media, which helps businesses and institutions build stories through podcasts, web series, and events. Vasanthi has had a distinguished career with Indian Express, Radio City 91.1,
That's right.
NDTV 24/7, and many, many more. So she also is the host of a podcast, The Dosa King, on Spotify. And Vasanthi is known for her ability to connect with audiences and fluently speak 5 languages. I'm going to add here that she speaks and she can be understood in 5 languages. I can speak 5 languages, but can be understood only in 2. Right? So she's been conferred with the prestigious awards such as the Radio Excellence Award for being India's English RJ of the Year in 2007, the Rotary Vocational Excellence Award in 2013, and the UNFPA-backed Ladli Award for Gender Sensitivity in Journalism in 2020. And last but not the least, I know that she's called Dodda by somebody who's very, very dear to her.
Very.
And I'm called Dodda by somebody who's very dear to me. So from one Dodda to another,
Thank you.
welcome. Absolutely a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
When I spoke to you and asked you to be on the podcast, I said, I know you. You don't know me, which is actually good for you.
It is good for me because the unknown and a conversation which with fancy equipment and at a beautiful place in Bangalore, what's not to like that?
Really, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Chin. Thank you so much.
So the podcast is called The Happiness Helix. So it's about happiness. The reason why we're doing this podcast is to make sure that there are as many people who can have access to information at no cost to live a better, happier life. That's the basic premise.
Right.
So the Happiness Helix has 6 landings. And while I've explained to you before we started shooting, I thought it would be better for people who are watching this one to also have that information right now with them.
Absolutely.
So in this moment, we have a choice. I can either choose to go up the happiness helix or down the unhappiness slide. The happiness helix starts with, this is it. I'm responsible for who, what, how, where I am. If I take that attitude, chances are that I will actually take ownership and have a good attitude, which leads me to the third landing, which is I will have a wider circle of people who will likely want to support me. Which leads me to the fourth landing, which is I will achieve my goals by design predictably, consistently. Fifth landing, which is greater confidence. Sixth landing, therefore, is I'd start taking on larger, bigger objectives. And if I take on larger, bigger objectives, then chances are I'll wake up in the morning wanting to wake up and do something in life.
That's right.
So that's the happiness helix. Going down, why is the world so bleeped up? And therefore, I'm not taking responsibility for myself. I have a lousy attitude. I'm not liked. I don't achieve my objectives. I lose confidence, take on smaller and smaller objectives, and life becomes a chore. So that's the premise, the hypothesis. And I've been checking this hypothesis out with a few people. I've been a coach full-time for about 15 years, and I've been seeing this pan out in their lives. So I'd like first to ask you one question. How does this sound to you, and how does it resonate with you? And you, like I said, you're probably the one person that I know who's traveled the most in India, right? 17 states, right?
Yes.
So
If you were to count Kashmir as a union territory now, then yes.
yes. So I'll zip up now. And what are your thoughts on this?
So, my first honest thoughts are, do we really need to decode happiness to this extent? And I know why you're doing this. I'm saying that if you were to really, if I were to give people who are watching as the example of my grandmother, who could typically be anybody's party, anybody's grandmother, her name was Padmini. And there was that aura of trupti around her, that contentment, that happiness, which it was not like she was this beaming, vivacious, sparkling woman, but she was always in the happy zone. Like, I don't remember a day when she was ranting, cribbing, had things bad to say about the world. You just went to her place. First of all, she would feed you. That's it. You no asking. That's it. We lost her 3 years back when she was 3 months away from being 100 years old. Wow. So Padmini Patti, as I used to share, or even on my Facebook and other Instagram and stuff, was one of those who was a default state of being.
Okay.
Now, coming to and connecting that to what you have asked me, I feel that when I meet people on the ground, whether there's in UP, Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, and there are certain people who are just like that.
Yes.
They have not even made an effort. It's just
Absolutely.
their natural setting.
It's who they are.
And if I were to sit these people down, my grandmother somewhere in Murshidabad or something, they might actually laugh at the question saying, what is it? Like, is there any other way of being? Yeah. So there is the thing that they're made with, the work that they do, their lot, their destiny. So, and whatever came their way, it just came along, right? They in modern words, they embraced it. I don't think they would even relate to that intellectualization. Yeah. So I am an inheritor of that legacy, Chino. So I don't give too much thought to what goes into happiness. That's why I was just happy to listen to you. Absolutely. But if you were to ask me what my life funda has been, and which is what I have tried to hashtag, because that seems to work, is just go where life takes, take what life gives.
Yeah.
And the summation of these two is happiness.
I couldn't agree more. Follow-up question, therefore. You said that Padmini Patti. And then there are a few Padmini Pattis out there that you have come across in your life,
yes,
in your travels. What percentage of people are actually Padmini Pattis?
I can only say that it's a dwindling percentage. The jury is out. No one's got the data. No one's done that level of research. But it's also true that I have met more such happy beings. And I'm not talking only about India. A decade back, I had a chance to be a documentary anchor of a South Asia series called One Square Mile on BBC World News. Mm-hmm. And it took me into countries where I hadn't been. I wouldn't have thought that I would go as a tourist, Laos, for instance. Mm-hmm. So we were filming in South Laos, and that was a place which had been bombed out after the Vietnam War. It actually is the most, I think, till date, the most bombed country. We're talking about literally cluster bombs making their way, and it was raining these ammunition and the unidentified objects. And so there was a whole population where we were filming. Mm-hmm. I had gone from Bangalore, the BBC crew had come from London. And I remember asking this person, and it was a tribe called Mongkong, Mongkong. Mm-hmm. And mine was to talk to them about, because what had happened, and that's what had taken us there, is that these cluster bombs and remnants of these were still on the ground. I mean, where do they even disappear? So the children of that area in Laos, this was south, would probably pick it up thinking that it's a ball. It has exploded, it has maimed them, left them limbless. And I'm in that place, and I'm just looking at them. There is no sign of anger in that population. For whom life has been so unfair. I mean, they didn't have a stake in whether it was US or Vietnam, and sitting in a geography where they is their ancestral land. But then the child of their family goes, and the next thing you know is coming back limbless. I would imagine is an angry population, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
But and it was actually quite, I mean, it was a sad situation, but it was quite hilarious in that we had two levels of interpreters. So there was me asking the question in English to the person who was converting that into Vientianese, and then the Mongkong dialect. And then it would go to that person who I was asking, who had lost his limb and was trying to work with his left hand, producing beautiful pieces of craft. And then my question, being this typical Indian, had to say, don't you really think that, I mean, what is your sentiment and emotion? This was, of course, a decade younger me. I said, what is your sentiment when you think of the United States and what has happened and is happening to your children years after Vietnam War? Mm-hmm. And that question travels to the next. And then the interpreter second said, wah, 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 ha, ha. And then in that whatever dialect, and that person says, huh. That's it. And I'm like, okay, what did they just say? Then it's traveling back to say, well,
that's life.
That's it. Maybe even then that's life didn't come. So it's like, so you read of the concept of Sthita Prajna, which appealed to me so much when I was doing the Ramayanam reading for my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking that, somebody who doesn't exult in joy or kind of plunge into despair, and that's quite a stoic, or rather quite a state to achieve to be in.
Yeah.
And it also sort of, when the curve is going up and down, it kind of stabilizes you to a situation where probably you're just an observer. Mm-hmm. Where you are an external observer of all things internal. And so even when life is dealing like absolute terrible things, you're just kind of chuckling at yourself, saying, now, Ipapakla, what do you do? Now you deal with it. So this is the kind of philosophy that has been passed on to us. This is a life experience that I am getting to see as a journalist. And I just see that there are people who are living theories. Mm-hmm. Their whole life has been led by this. And which is why there is no count of the people. Mm-hmm. But I think this skew happens in urban population because we also probably I meet a lot of people who are in the age of, let's say, 18 or even 10 plus or something like that. And sometimes I do spot that anger which has no channel.
Yeah.
So it's, you just hope that it's kind of a river that will get away to an ocean of calm and happiness.
Very interesting. What, when you were talking about it, thought that was going on in my head was, I recently heard in a podcast that there was this UN force that had gone somewhere in Africa. And there was this really bad violence that was taking place. And there's this, similar to this, there's this woman who's lost quite a few members of her family. And there's these groups of these doctors who are there. And she was like, matter of fact. So the doctor was there saying that she couldn't care less. She said, you're here to help others. I'm here to support you. Tell me what you want. I'm going to feed you. So the same kind of, we need to go on.
Yes.
Right? And another interesting point that I picked up in what you're saying, this urban, I see that also. In urban populations, there seems to be that anger. It's always simmering under the surface.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the statement that Sunil Dutt makes in Munna Bhai MBBS, when they catch
Sanjay Dutt. Sunil
Dutt.
Oh, the first one.
Nawazuddin Siddiqui is the pickpocket.
Right.
At the station. And then he gets caught. And then everybody is wanting to beat him up. And then Sunil Dutt makes a very interesting statement. Should I turn you over to them? Somebody is happy because his child is not listening to him. Somebody is unhappy because his wife they're not having a great relationship. So there seems to be this undercurrent of unhappiness and anger that's maybe seen more in urban populations. Is that a hypothesis that we can come to, or is it not, according to you?
If I say let's say, because I get to see a lot of rural India, this is by choice. And after I moved on from my mainstream television news network, which was NDTV, and after that, I made a conscious choice to travel into districts and towns. And it's a very liberating feeling that you see, you're just at, it's your pick. Today, I shall go into Bhubaneswar. And tomorrow, I'll go into Kerala. What's the ground like? Or you're literally, as I went during Karnataka elections into districts like Raichur and later on Chhattisgarh, etc., is one of the dangers of doing that is that you think the rural space is somewhat very sorted. Because people like to say that, अरे हमारे गांव में तो अरे कितना वहाँ पर ना ये ऐसा प्रदूषण नहीं होता, वहाँ पर तो खेत ही खेत है. नहीं, वो सब तो ठीक है, पर गांव में समस्याएं भी तो उतनी ही है. That's exactly why people are quitting villages and coming to the cities. There is resentment, there is patriarchy, there is intercaste rivalry, there are killings, there are honor killings, there are things which are a lot of unspent rage. There is the unfairness of the system being against you, you not getting your due, your children not getting the kind of education, all that is there. But I'm just saying that in terms of being equipped to handle what you've been given, I still feel rural India is at a big advantage compared to a lot of people that in our, like you know what, I don't know if you've heard of this PNU, which is people like us. So the middle class, the upper middle class, or the educated class, so to speak, I feel that the more we acquire an education, and this holds true of even, let's say, people in my profession, in journalism, media, podcasting, saying that you decide to overthink the hell out of anything. Now that automatically leads to unhappiness. Really, because on one hand, the concepts like mindfulness, which are all the rage, which probably you need to bring back because you're thoughtlessly just shoving food into your thing while binge watching something on a Netflix, or you're just doing things in a very mechanical manner because it's the way to be seen doing it, not just doing it, but the perception is that I have to be seen in these book launches or to be doing that. Never mind if it takes me 2 hours of mind-numbing traffic and that sort of helplessness and agitated mind. All this is what we signed up for.
Yeah.
Now, if you are making that choice and the outcome or the path to that is giving you major irritants in the process, it's all going to add up to unhappiness. There are very few people who say that, you know what, actually, I am the one who made a choice to be in the thick of, let's say, the rat race, so I better be the rat. Right? And this is what I came for. But when you you want that, but you are not, let's say, you're not ready to go that path and those minor things, then ultimately it's going to land up to what we call in Kannada the asamadhana. Like, yav madidrunu, you just like, oh my gosh, what is it? And ultimately, are you enjoying what you wanted to enjoy? Now, only that part, I feel that when I go into a smaller town, maybe because there are things which are less complicated, the number of variables are not much. So yeah, there is a bigger overarching destiny above you. If you really landed up in a household, if you're a woman who's married into this absolutely moody, shouting, yelling at somebody's family, that's a big destiny. But even within that, people kind of come up with their own control mechanisms, like how you shut out that noise. Now that I feel maybe the rural, semi-urban, tier 2 is better off.
Again, I'm aware that you said I shouldn't overthink it. However, is that because it's acceptance, which is an active, positive attribute? Or is it apathy, which is a negative, nothing's going to happen, I can't change it? Which do you think? Because if it's acceptance, then it's obviously sthita prajna, going towards.
Yeah.
Apathy is, I don't have the resources to be able to do anything better. So I just keep my mouth shut. Which do you think you've seen in let's say, semi-urban, rural India? Because the reason for my question is, there is all of these, like you said, these caste wars. There is this patriarchy. There is this oppression of various kinds, right? So in that kind of, my very limited experience, I haven't traveled as much as you. My limited experience is that some of them are extremely evolved and they're in the zone of acceptance. My limited experience is that it's more to do with apathy than with acceptance. I'd like to know what your experience has been.
I would tilt towards acceptance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Let me give a case study. I was in Raipur, or rather, I was called to Raipur by this friend who used to run particularly a radio station meant for tribal populations. And given the Chhattisgarh, there is this huge, right in the heartland of India, there are tribes, especially who speak Gondi, their local bhasha. And many of them have not been, I mean, if you were to really go, as I eventually went there, you could easily think we are India in 1970s, if not even let's say the 60s. Because there is just such a lack of what we call the modern infrastructure, the shining India, and so much that you would think that nobody takes anything for granted. Like if probably the power comes, then it's a blessing. Or probably there will be such astonishment that, okay, we have something. In many parts, when I traveled in 2017 to that place, the mobile networks weren't even there. Like, in fact, that gave rise to a very interesting radio model. Shubhranshu, the guy I'm speaking about, he's a friend, and he said, Vasanthi, can you just come and help ID it on this radio network, because you've been a radio person. I think I must say that even more than my television career, if there is a medium that I personally is my favorite, would be radio. It's the medium that's the most intimate in terms of connecting to the audiences. So I said, okay. And in any case, I believe a lot in community radio, which is that radio has to serve the community that it's meant for, not just play A.R. Rahman and Shreya Ghoshal and sort of, move the audience. So when I told him, I said, sure, I'm just coming on one condition, that I get to travel Chhattisgarh, because otherwise I have never been a reporter there, and this gives me a chance. So when I went to Chhattisgarh, it was an eye-opener, because it was my first time there. And many of these, and in a place called Jabarra, which is a forest area, there were many vast tracts of tribal land, tribal people, and the local person who was assisting, or rather just come with me, though I was traveling alone, he said, please, hamare ghar aiye. I said, no, I don't want to bother you. You just said that your wife has relatives coming in. So, bang in the middle of nowhere, there is this guest house-like structure standing, and I could see paddy fields. It's almost 8 o'clock by the time we landed in that Fatfati from Raipur towards Jabarra. And I'm just going there, and I'm just thinking, what did I just say yes to? Because I want to be alone in that place. There was just nobody there. And I just see, like I said, in that whole darkness, a board that said, Headquarters, Sarjapur, Bangalore. Okay? And and I'm just thinking, this is Chhattisgarh, because dur tak वैसे कुछ ज़्यादा बिजली इतना नजर नहीं आ रहा था. And it turned out to be the Azim Premji Foundation thing there, which was training the trainers. It was having a teacher program and was catering to the entire tribal population in that. So I spent the night there. It was kind of eerie. There was a security guard, an absolute hulk, and there was me in my in my room. So when the next morning I left the place, I said that, okay, now I need to set off again. So I met many of these tribals, and that's where I'm coming to the point that they were like, and in their Gondi, which was translated by Purushottam for me, and rather than feel angry and unhappy at what this was, and I'm sure all those are there, I'm not denying that at all, but the overbearing emotion when they saw me was one of gratitude to the Premji Foundation there, to the fact that teachers have come कितने दूर दूर से आए, मतलब कहाँ से आके हमारे बच्चों को पढ़ा रहे हैं. There's no sense of entitlement. So this entitlement that we have and increasingly have, especially in the, I hate to sound preachy, but in the next generation, simply because we've been at fault and at probably handing things on a platter to our children and our young people. So I feel that when I just close my eyes and think of that man who was in that Jabara forest, feeling nothing but gratitude at a place where otherwise would say that how can we be left out? How can you do this to us? Look at you. You all have 24 hours water and electricity and bandwidth and 5G and God knows which other G network. And what have we done? Are we not are we less of an Indians? None of this. The thing was the most obvious, evident thing in that man's face was, I just remember that smile, saying that my daughter is going to school. Tomorrow she is going to be a teacher. Now, mere beti teacher banegi. Now, you, again, were not exoticizing, but I think there is a lot to learn from that section of society. There is that by no means means that, people therefore should be left to this thing in that lot. We should still create aspirations because that is the ticket to the better future. Having said that, this part of the Indian philosophy, this acceptance, or even why Indian, I think South Asian, Eastern, all this, the base philosophy holds the key, according to me, for this santosha, that no matter what you throw at me, and that's essentially, Chinu, something which I have always had, again, credit to elders in the family, is that the happiness is within. Therefore, you can change whatever externalities.
Absolutely.
You can people can take away. Of course, it creates momentary anger and angst and all that. But ultimately, you just fall back on that reservoir you've created for inside. So that lake, that lake of happiness inside is what fills me.
For some strange reason, when you were speaking, I remembered Wayne Dyer, who in our talk, he says, if I take an orange and squeeze it, I should be surprised if I get something other than orange juice. Right? So if I squeeze an orange, I'll get orange juice. A lemon, I'll get lemon juice. So when you're under pressure, what comes out is who you are. Right? So what you said just now about this person, where there could be 1,000 reasons for them to feel angry, upset, and left out. But they're choosing to look at the brighter side and saying that, you know what, I'm happy that this is happening and my daughter is going to become a teacher and she's going to contribute.
Yeah.
Right? Very interesting. I'm going to switch a little.
Sure.
Which is the one most hilarious kind of incident, event that you've experienced in your travels as a journalist? I'm sure you must have many.
Many. It's a problem of plenty. The quickest one that comes to mind is a man I met on Juhu Beach in Mumbai. Before I was setting off on a real deep dive into India's probably most complex, in the sense there are many. There is a whole Northeast, but I'm saying that in terms of the vastness, the political mesh, Uttar Pradesh is a thing, or is a state in its own right. And I was setting off for the assembly elections a couple of years back, and I was actually to travel from Bangalore to Lucknow. But a friend of mine, Chinmay, my former colleague from television, he said that, you know what, your travels are all self-financed, solo. Don't spend too much on equipment. Mere paas hai, tum le lena. I've got a new GoPro. Why don't you just take it on your travel? One condition, because life conditions apply, is a thing. So he said, you have to come to Mumbai to take it, because I don't want to courier or post it. I said, fair enough. Entry to the capital of, or to Uttar Pradesh via the commercial capital of India, fair enough. So then he said that, you see, you just take this camera. He just showed me some of these features and said that you go try it out on Juhu Beach.
Okay.
Because that's where he was staying. So I go to the beach and I was trying out it. I was trying to say that, okay, hi, namaskar, मैं अभी जा रही हूँ उत्तर प्रदेश चुनाव के लिए और आप, चुनाव विश्लेषण and all these big words I'm trying to rehearse. And I said, okay, let me just check if there are UPIs here because Mumbai is a melting pot.
Yeah.
And then I just stood at the Juhu Beach, GoPro in my hand, and I just looked around and said, यहाँ कोई UP के हैं क्या? And the next, before I finished the sentence, there's 7 people in the frame. So then I said, अच्छा तो ठीक है, बात करते हैं. आपको क्या लगता है, योगी जी आएंगे कि अखिलेश जी आएंगे, क्या है मायावती and all these things. And so massive, there's nothing that interests the Indian more than literally giving his take. I'm not saying her take because women always defer it to the men in the family and I try to get them to talk. And the men said, हाँ वो क्या किया है, अरे बहन जी ने क्या किया है, ये है वो है. But there was this one man who was standing thoda sa, like, a few meters away, and he was just watching us. One short guy, silver beard, and then this thing from his uniform, I could see he's a security guard, probably somewhere in a Juhu office. So he just kept in very observant. And then a few minutes later, I called him. I said, आप भी आइए ना, मतलब क्या है, ये तो हम चर्चा ही कर रहे हैं, आप भी यूपी के तो नहीं? He said, हाँ हम बिल्कुल हैं. अच्छा, कहाँ के हैं आप? Then it turned out to be that sort of a UP, Nepal, the eastern Purvanchal side. And I will shrink the conversation. His name was Parmod Lal Shukla.
Okay.
So Parmod Shukla started off by saying, Suryodaya kitne baje hota hai? So in between talking about Yogi Adityanath and Akhilesh Yadav, and I think, where is the sun landing in the conversation? It was really quite funny and it was very fuzzy for me. And I said, aap Suryodaya ki baat kyun kar rahe? Wahan par, again, it's not like the different time zones. Then I figured that he, in the Arabian Sea of the place where he was close to, offers arghya to the sun god because that is part of his deep belief. I found it very... And when he spoke, it wasn't with the body language of a security guard as one would imagine, but with the confidence of a man who knows his region, his traditions, his rituals, and his Surya Uday. And he said that, Are, tabhi to na hota hai. So, in Mumbai, between this is the sunrise time, this in May, this is what it is. And I found it fascinating that in all my million trips to Mumbai, I would have never really focused at what time the sun is rising. But this is the thing. Now, the next thing he said, you're going to, and he demanded to know. It wasn't just a thing. He said, कहाँ जा रही हैं आप? हाँ, अच्छा, कौन से जिले में? So I told him, I said, हाँ, मैं तो वृंदावन से जाऊंगी यहाँ से. फिर उसके बाद, I was planning to go to Bundelkhand. And then later on, Ayodhya, Awadh, Lucknow, Gorakhpur, etc. So he said, acha. And then that man is actually sizing me up, like it's his thing. And I was a keen one wanting to take notes of what the place was. So the roles were reversed and he said, Ganga ji mein nahayega. So then I said, of course, matlab Ganga ji to nahana to hoga, lekin main to abhi patrakar ban ke ja rahi hu. I don't know whether I'll be able to afford a Ganga snan in time. And so I said, Ganga ji mein kya rakha hai? Yamuna ji nahaye? And I said, this is a new thesis. Nobody ever sells Yamuna river wash or river bath. So I said, Kyun? And I am somebody who lived a bit of my life in Uttar Pradesh. Yeah. My father was posted there. We were in Bulandshahr, the Wild West, as a student. So I said, Par kyun? Matlab, why not Ganga? But then he, of course, quick mythology reference, he said, well, Ganga passes through Shivji's feet. She came from the Himalayas. Yamuna ji to patrani hai. Then she is always in the, she's a queen. So you should quote the queen.
Yeah.
And so by which time I was really smiling. And they said, nobody. I said, Pramod ji, aapko to kahin, aap वैसे भी Mumbai में ही हैं. मुझे लगता है कि Javed Akhtar साहब या this thing, you should be actually having a thing as a script writer. And the words that he was using, the language, it was so rich and things like that. So, Chino, he told me one thing. He said, I will tell you one place in UP, which nobody will guide you to. And you, as a traveler, you must be priding yourself that you have seen this, you've done that. Have you known of a place where 5 rivers meet in Uttar Pradesh? I'm asking you also. Because, exactly, I drew a blank and I was like,
I know Triveni Sangam I've heard of, and that's about the maximum.
Yeah. So he told me the name of the place, which I will not tell you. I went into Bundelkhand from Agra, etc. Land up at a Sarpanch's house where I landed up staying, because I do a lot of this staying in people's homes than hotels. And of course, had a deeper understanding, or at least look at the ground. It was UP election stand. And I asked the Sarpanch of that place, which is not too far from where the 5 rivers are supposed to meet. None of them knew it. And the Sarpanch, it was like, kahan hai ye 5 nadi milne wala? And then the wise men of the village, all of them are trying to say, अरे वो तो नहीं है, अच्छा वो गांव है, वो सीतापुर के पास है, वो इसमें है, ना. Then there's a big debate going on. None of those wise men knew what this man, security guard in Juhu, had told me. And finally, the Sarpanch decided to come with me, leaving his Sarpanchness. He said that मैं भी आपके साथ चलूंगा. And so we went on these rugged terrains, places where, there were all these, let's say, this was Bundelkhand as I was telling you. So it's basically the Chambal. The Chappal Ghati, right, which we have seen, of place of Dakus and things, so there's ravines and all that. Finally, we came to a place where there was the meeting of 5 rivers, and the place is called Pachnada. Panch Nadi. Pachnada. And to think that, I don't know if because even the GPS wasn't guiding us. It was just amazing. I still have that man's number. He's told me that if I ever land up in the Nepal border, I should just tell him, and his biradari will come and give me wheat and rice and all that stuff. So many interesting lessons all in one. It was so humbling, because a lot of city people might treat a security guard like either you are very patronizing or you are totally dismissive. You don't really think that anybody else has to offer you anything. You are the repository of, because you've acquired yourself a BTech or an MBA or God knows what. But try matching this Pramod Shukla, which all the wise men of that village in Jalon where I went, which by the way is called the Matar capital of India. Matar as in green peas.
Okay. Yeah,
because they have something called the Matar Mahotsav.
Oh, wow.
It's the biggest green peas producing.
Like the tomato fair.
So I think it was like a joke played out of the Sarpanch who had this thing of, I know my place. And I just told him, I said, kaun si hai? And then it was like a maze, it was like a puzzle. Yeah. So this is the innate wisdom of the man who knows his land.
Maybe he was a person who, like you said, had come to be a Javed Akhtar and didn't find it, and therefore...
He didn't say so. He was very pragmatic. Okay. He said, and he had his lands back there. Bade bhai sahab hai hamare, and he was from the Bihar side of things. So he had no illusions about who he was. He wasn't even pretending to be... and there was this thing of, okay, I earn my bread and butter this way, and then the harvest season, I go back to my... So if and I'm reading a very, really beautiful book by Chinmay Tumbe, India Moving, where he traces the migration of communities of India. He tries to trace back 200 years of Marwadi history, Chettiars and, the Bora Muslims and so many other trading communities. But then when you really meet the migrant, and all of us are, I certainly am, you just see the things you pick up on your journey, and you keep dipping into that wisdom. And again, coming back to my original premise, that it's happiness. It doesn't matter where you're working.
Absolutely. So, Pramod Shukla for Pachnada.
Yes.
Every day we learn, and this is one thing I've learned today. There's a place of 5 rivers meeting. Okay?
Yeah.
Maybe
Chambal, Yamuna.
I'm a motorcyclist, so we go out on motorcycles. I don't know whether it'll be able to get to this place on a motorcycle, but should be...
The roads were good.
Okay, lovely.
Roads were good.
So I should get my my brotherhood of bikers.
Yes,
See,
I'm happy to be your remote control Margdarshak.
You were, let's say, I did two things that came up when I was listening to you. One, I did manage to watch your podcast with Cyrus,
Oh,
where Cyrus also spoke very highly of the security guards, all buildings,
right.
that you can't go in without the security guards. So
Yeah.
one more reason why we should be very respectful of security guards. You were, from that podcast, I got to know that you walked into the Indian Express and decided to be a journalist.
Yes.
And when you said, and I'm hearing that, I said, oh, okay, Queen's Road. Because we were the auditors for the Indian Express Group. And I used to come here for audits.
Acha.
And that was Bangalore of in where 5:30 everybody would just go home, right? And I would be walking around and walk down. So anyway, what made you make the shift from being, let's say, like you said, a rat in the rat race and follow what seems to obviously give you a lot of, I'm not going to use the word happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction, and your reason for living, so to say. So what was that spark that made you choose that? Because that's another area where I have a great interest. Was, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I start with saying, you need to know why you exist. You're an infinite energy source that has now been condensed into a finite shape and form, which means that you have a purpose. There is nothing greater or smaller than anything else. You have a purpose. So, what made you choose this?
I had a fantastic run, something which I can't even take credit for because one thing led to another. And when I went as a guest to a radio station to speak on press freedom, and within the next few months, I found myself that I was the host, or I was asked to take over something which is called the primetime breakfast show that literally woke up Bangalore city at that time. This was the mid-2000s. I had always a sense of wonder. So there was no scope for saying that, wow, how smart I have been in choosing my career, because you didn't even know to ask for that great turn. Indian Express itself, Chitra Subramaniam, the great journalist who we read so much about, had in a way she definitely played a part. Otherwise, I come from an electronics background. I was a science student, and to actually make a miraculous escape from the world of electronics into this form of exciting radio, television, news, print, documentary, podcast means I must have done something good, or my grandmother did, and my mother and father did. So one of the things which probably this sense of fulfillment I anyway found across these different career paths led to a point where I felt that I was still at the surface. And that was a time when I had this opportunity to be a part of the BBC series, 1 Square Mile, but also that I had my son at home. And I remember telling a friend of mine saying that I'm feeling like this Bollywood mother. And so I said that I should do justice to that side of me. Also for very selfish reasons, that fellow will probably finish school and then later go to college, and then I'll say, oh no, I never got to spend time with him. So I felt that was a time to pack up my bags. It helped that the nature of the beast of news, television, that it's very superfluous. In fact, the organization was good. Like, they really looked after you. You were the best in the best space that you could probably make a mark on the scene. But I'm so glad that I did what my heart said at that point of time. My husband was saying, "Are you sure?" Because people then go on to that sort of peak or pinnacle of that particular TV career. I said, no, I know. And if at all I'm destined to be back in television or this thing, I'm sure it'll happen. And, we have always believed, my sister Vidya always says, Ishvaraha yat karoti, shobhanameva karoti. So everything happens for good. Now, when I went into that space and then ultimately the break, it was my so-called break time. I just said that, okay, I'm just going to wander around and do what this thing, and no accountability, no news desk to file my story within this deadline, no Saturday, Sundays to be missed with the family. Suddenly I'm feeling so free. But that, and then of course I started traveling, which at that point of time I just thought is just one place come back, another state come back. Because I also am a moderator of panel discussions. I'm an anchor, show host. So I used to get approached once in a while to go to these places. But in between, entrepreneurship happened yet again by absolute sheer chance. Like when we were curating a film festival in the honor of this late actress Smita Patil, and Pickle Jar was born. And Pickle Jar, again, led us and me and my little team into so many experiences. We did election content. We did online film festivals when COVID happened. And therefore, why I did this was that probably that spark of dissatisfaction that this is not deep enough. If it was deep enough, then I would have had some justification to stay away from my son and my family, or rather be so busy. But either this or that. If it's not happening, then that's fine. Let me just. So the root was that asamadhana, which was causing me a lot of unhappiness at that point. But it led me to a state of more and more wonders to be discovered on the earth, on the land that we are in. Got to travel a lot outside India as well, more as somebody making sense of the media. I was called to Penang, for instance, to actually give a sort of this thing to 9 NGOs from across China and so many other countries on how do you get the media to tell your story, right? So this sort of thing, every time I feel so relieved. I said, okay, you're getting to do things on your own terms at your own pace. Of course, you lose out on a lot of the financial and the perk side, but the compensation is so enriching that you would not have it any other way.
Slightly controversial. Personally.
Bring it on.
Personally, I took a call on the 2nd of April 2010 not to read a newspaper again in my life. And on the 2nd of April 2010, I said I'll stop watching news channels also. Why? And I haven't. I haven't, because, I don't know whether it was Mark Twain who said it. If you don't read the papers, you're uninformed. If you read the papers, you're misinformed. Right? So somewhere along the line...
Suddenly knew what you said. Yeah.
So, today, there was this time when the fourth estate was a pillar of all things democratic, right? My personal view, again, opinion alert, so you can discard it, is that when this became a business, right? TRP started mattering. It used to be the Audit Bureau of Circulation in the time when I used to do the audits. But somewhere along the line, there is now, to my mind, there is cacophony, right? And there is so much of a bias. So when I read an article, if somebody sends me an article, I read an article and I look at, who's this person? Okay, let me sleuth a little about who they are, what their leanings are. And then through the filter of me knowing their leanings, I will now read the article.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll come to the controversy here. Have you had instances in your life when your values were, let's say, conflicted with regard to what you needed to do, what you were asked to do? And I'll have a follow-up question after you answer.
Luckily, because I had made a conscious choice, particularly during 2014 when the BJP government came to power, and that's when probably people felt that they had an ideology inside, or it was sleeping, or then you chose either you were this way, that way. Though technically doesn't, by definition, what you call a right wing or a left wing is in theory a lot different. But for purposes that we understand in India, this, if you support this, you're right. If you don't, then you're left. And somewhere are the centrists. Now, I had experimented with myself, like the Amitabh Bachchan Rekha song goes, "Main aur meri tanai aksar baatein karte hain," and I do this lot of talk with myself. And I did take a conscious choice, and that's anyway who I am, saying that I am going to stay, I wouldn't say apathy, I wouldn't say out of it. I will be in the center of it because I talk to people and people have politics. And I will stay equally listening of this side as well as that side. And I mean, it's not just that there are two, but whatever there is a perspective to be had in why you choose to support whichever ideology.
Yeah.
It is a sum total of probably your own experiences, and then what your parents supported, or probably what you're reading, the material or the YouTube videos that you're watching, the labels or the bylines that you follow. There are just so many things that you need to have a very strong core to not be swayed by anything. I have not had any conflict of values in that sense. Probably because, interestingly, I was called by the Congress party to in terms of communication and how should party cadres engage with the media and things like that. So I took that session for many newly elected legislators for that. And years later, I wasn't exactly called by BJP, but certainly was in the part of a thing where, they were ideating on their own party ideology. So one part of business, and somebody who doesn't know me enough, they'll say, okay, if they see you in Congress circles, they're going to think that I'm anti-BJP. And likewise, they will say that, okay, I'm so pro-BJP, and what you have wonderful other labels, which I just don't believe in. I have never once used them ever in my writing. I feel very proud that I have stayed away from these limiting identities. So the people, I moderated a book discussion with Vikram Sampath, the historian, on Veer Savarkar. Okay. And since you asked me a controversial question, I think I should get on to an absolute center of controversy with a figure like Savarkar. So the book was obviously a biography, an exhaustive, extensive biography of this man who, yes. So when for me, it was just a vantage view to see what today's India is. Somebody said, why did they choose you to moderate that? My God, these days these commies and lefties are being asked to moderate book on Savarkar. And then there was this other former colleague of mine who said, oh, so you have now crossed over, right? You're now. So then, and on a media network that I am a part of, a Media Women Network thing, so there was absolute radio silence on this because they're super fond of me, and they thought that anything that they say will be against me or I might. So I in fact, I provoked, and I said, hey, how come no one's reacting to this? And then slowly when they started sharing, I said, yeah, Vasulti, I was very disappointed that you're taking this up. I said, but aren't we supposed to be knowing, getting deeper into, rather than hold on to our own assumptions? And what would I really know about Savarkar or the Kalapani 50 years that young man of 27 actually faced? And what were his life realities? Why did he begin to have that thought that he had? What would I know? And what gives me really the right to sit in a 2022 to say that, okay, how dare he do this? And how can we do that? Aren't we supposed to be, forget about journalists, aren't we supposed to be Indians who are seekers, who are keen on knowing? That didn't cut, that argument doesn't always fly, but that's okay. I do what I've got to do.
Thank you very much. And the follow-up question. One of the things that I personally tell people is that if I think or believe or know that this is it. That I have a very clear understanding of something. To me, I've learned that that's the time that I need to prove the exact opposite right. Because anything that I believe that I know or believe or know to know, I need to prove the exact opposite right. How else will I know what the other perspective is?
Yes.
And in looking at the exact opposite perspective, I might not get a 180-degree opposite perspective. I might get somewhere there, but that will give me a sort of a rounded view rather than my own biased perspective of where I am. Because I come at it from understanding of the human brain. Extremely lazy. Energy hungry, therefore extremely lazy. Wants to generalize, distort, delete, and path of least resistance, wants to keep on going. So it takes a different kind of mentality, a different kind of approach to actually go against the grain, especially in this kind of thing. So I think what you said just now, to me, resonated with that. You know what? We need to be able to listen to all points of view. We can then make a educated, so to say, overview, or you can come to a certain conclusion.
Yeah.
At least, I don't think it's a conclusion, at least a point where you say, maybe I don't have all of the data. Maybe there is another view to look at it from. Do you think that is lacking today? Is it lacking genuinely? Or is it appearing to be lacking because they're just playing to the galleries in the media today?
I would even extend it to the people. We've so fallen deep into the trap of generalizations or hero worshipping, or let's say not wanting to delve anything deeper beyond headlines. Our WhatsApp groups, my God, they couldn't be better brand of poison and visham than that. The case in point, an example would be when I went to Kashmir. And my whole thing was that, okay, Article 370 has been abrogated. And this is the first time the region is going to vote. Parliamentary elections and elections I love because there's never a better time. It's so robust. And so I made that plan. And when I came back, so people are like, how was it, by the way? You traveled deep. I said, yes, I went into 5 districts. There were 10 days and I was in Baramulla and Anantnag and Jammu part and all these things. So I said, how is it? So they want to just hear, yes, they are happy. No, they are unhappy. Like, they must be happy, no? I mean, first of all, the thing comes with an assumption. I was almost like, why even bother asking me? They are happy? No, means that they better be happy. That is the statement, the purported meaning of that. So I said, can't say. It's not such a black and white thing. After all, they have reasons to be happy. But there is an obvious increase in tourist footprint, which translates to better revenue, and people going into be able to go to school without really a mother fearing that, okay, there's going to be curfew, strike, this, that, militancy, forces, all that thing. But at the same time, I don't think they're completely happy because they're still coming to terms with many of these things. And there are more factors. Now, a lot of people are like, how much can you do, man? For Kashmir, I said, oh, thank you. It's very, very kind of you, you see. Very kind of you to actually sit somewhere in Tirupatur or something like that and just think that you have done your bit for the thing. You have, and look at how many 1,000 crores have gone from the center to the fund to the thing. There is something called delivery, leakage of delivery, and there is just so many of these channels there. People are not bothered. Blissfully, you want to be in your bubble and you want me to say something that makes your stay inside the bubble even more comfortable. If I really prick even this bit or that bit, that's it. You are not my friend. I can unfriend you in one button and there you go, vanish. So this sort of, let's say, is there a genuine lack of thing? I think, yeah, well, you can choose to be educated. It's up to you to choose your sources wisely. What have you been given education for? What has the state, what has the government of India made your education so cheap for? But you don't do anybody anything. You just want to stay in your carefully constructed walls, not letting even a gust of wind to come your side. So I don't think it is really this thing. It is just by choice that people remain.
They hear what they want to hear. They see what they want to see.
Yeah, not just that, Chinu. They would say that they would want you to say that what they see is the right.
The reason I'm smiling,
Vision.
yesterday in one of the WhatsApp groups, school WhatsApp group, there was a cartoon that came on. I like to have an exchange of ideas. I'd like you to come in with yours and go out with mine.
Yeah.
Right? Many people are like that.
Yeah.
Like, you come in, you need to speak to me, you need to just take my views and you need to make it yours, and you shouldn't have a view of your own.
Yeah. So I always tell people that this term storyteller is so abused. Like, any journalist who goes there, and when the storyteller is himself or herself telling you only half of the story, or not telling you the real story, then you're doing your whole profession a disservice. It is not dharma at all.
Yeah.
That's why I really choose to call myself a story listener. Because I'm getting to listen to you and to you. Of course, that also can mean that you will take a lot longer. Your answers will be longer. There is no objective type tick mark happening, because you will end up saying something which is also, said by the other party, which makes everybody, uncomfortable in one sense. But I think the story listening part is what we lack as a country today. There are enough tellers. There is enough TikTok ka baap aur dada bhi hai. Like, you can just go you say your thing. But what is it that we're doing in our children and in the next generation for them to just quietly listen? That listening is not happening. For me, that's the place.
Why do you think that's so?
Because we are so... people love their voices. We underestimate that big theory. Yeah. A lot of people say, I want to stay behind the camera. That there is a genuine section. But the temptation to speak because of WhatsApp groups, because of a forced, unseen but forced hand to let your opinion be out. Like, nobody leaves you in the pre-WhatsApp era. You probably still felt, okay, Manmohan Singh, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, whichever government, Karunanidhi, Jayalalitha, you had your opinions, but you didn't always express them.
Yeah.
Because you thought it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Suddenly it seems to matter. It's not a bad thing, but frankly, with that comes the additional jawabdari, the responsibility, saying that what I'm putting out, and even to my own child, what I'm saying within my confines of my home. So it's almost that everybody is on the telling mode. I mean, I remember being, wherever we were, right? Let's say there were these ghazal nights or I don't know, like in UP there used to be a lot of this Ramcharitmanas kind of chant or katha. So people would really listen for hours together. You go into a place like Shirsi or the kind of Dakshin Kannada, Uttar Kannada belt, there's a lot of things that you're just quietly watching, just absorbing. And you were just making up your worldview with what your senses were delivering into your system. And that thing was so that unless, of course, you were a spokesperson for something, it all stayed. So there was a lot of listening and absorbing happening.
Yeah.
Now the stimulation is so high that even your friend groups, in your weddings, if you are just meeting up for that, to wish that person birthday or a happy married life, and then you're sitting for your uta or sambad or something like that, you start off a conversation, everybody feels compelled to say their piece. And it's invariably that defining objective type thing that's coming out. The listening is...
The reason I'm laughing is when I told a dear friend of mine, I said, I'm starting a podcast. He said, Tamil. I said, Matavale pesa kuduvia nee? Right? So I think that's I'm listening to you and I'm saying that WhatsApp especially and social media Twitter, whatever it is. In WhatsApp, people are talking at other people. That's my firm belief. In Twitter and most other social media platforms, the cloak of anonymity makes them down spew nonsense that they would not have the guts to say it in front of another person.
Yeah.
Right. So it is what it is. So you said something very interesting, and it sparked a thought in my head. You must have come across a lot of things that are extremely uplifting in your journeys, and I think you have mentioned a few of them. You might have also come across a lot of things that really touched a chord or made you feel, why is it like this? How did you manage to keep your composure in those things and stay true to your dharma of being a storyteller, of reporting, rather than getting your emotions get involved?
I think it's the field that you are in that gives you a training anyway. It's also a lot of other factors in this case very clearly what I've grown up reading or listening to from the family. Like I said, it's my mother's side particularly is very huge arguments over books and everyone's opinionated, but then the thing is that they are debating on what they have read and arguing, so that there was definitely a difference. But when you are entering a television or a profession that you see so much of, I remember reporting on the Mangalore crash when there was some 111 people who were killed in the crash, and you were still supposed to say what you had to say. You're reporting on crime, you're reporting on, like you said, terrific good news and things like that. But I think somewhere along the line, you learn to detach yourself from the story. And that is part of, I think it's many people who would, there is a very small section, but very melodramatic section of journalists or this thing, right, who get so absorbed that you will find them screaming, yelling at something which is very bothersome. I remember being told by Rob Finnegan, who had come to Nepal and Kathmandu was shooting, and then we saw some Indian channel there, and where the reporter was herself sobbing along with that and said, "Whoa, that's a drama queen." Said that. So I said, yeah, but please don't judge the country by there. That's just a dramatic drama queen journalist. So I think a lot of it has got to do with the work you do.
We seem to have, I understand the neuroscience behind it, that we have 5/6 of our neural circuits for avoidance of pain. So the negativity we absorb a lot fast, and that 1/6 of our circuits, and that's a survival mechanism. When we open the newspapers or when we look at media in general, why is there such a proliferation of the negativity? Is it to cater to that, to pander to that? Or is it that the journalists themselves don't have a filter for looking for the good ones?
If there were a newspaper, and there was one which was inspired by the late Abdul Kalam, which was called, I think, some Billion Beats or something, a newspaper that tried to give only good news. I'm sure you haven't heard of the paper.
Not at all.
That sort of should answer it.
Should there be a blend that is a little...
Who was to decide the blend? Who was the blender here? It's just that it's probably psychology. I've even stopped blaming the media for this. If you really had to have a newspaper where, and if you have to have a city, your own neighborhood, where somebody had stabbed somebody, and then the 3 roads later, somebody had given away half, probably his house provisions to somebody who came begging home, and you put that into, which is the news that's going to be read more, frankly, right? So
I preface that by saying that we have 5/6 of our neural circuits for negativity. We are drawn to negative things. It's an evolutionary trait.
Yeah, it is. And then my poor dear industry gets blamed for it. No, holding no flags for anyone here, but I'm saying that there are these, and then there are those who will go out of the way to fetch some things, and that's exactly why an entire industry is now spawned from that, which is called the fake news, which is to say that the same news, you see a part of it which either doesn't exist or you have twisted and distorted it to bring the most negative part of it, and which is designed to kind of make you want to go kill the person straight away. And if it's a community that you don't like this way, that way. So that's the entire industry that's thriving on this. You see whole new channels that are getting finance. And so they're not going to stop in any hurry. And therefore, it's just that people like you and I can only talk on this in a podcast.
A very dear friend asked me to watch a documentary about something that happened in the US and said, you should watch this. So I started watching this on a flight and I said, you know what, there's so much of negativity in this. I can't do this in one go. I'm going to, it's a 2.5 hour kind of documentary. I'm going to watch it in bits of 10 minutes. I can't take more than 10 minutes.
But good on you. What a good friend you are. I would have totally discarded.
And the statement that was made is that, you'd better watch this. This is, it has relevance to what's going to happen in your life. So watch it. And I said, okay. So I'm saying that there is this negative, let's say, filter that we all have. Anyway, one statement that I picked up from, again, yours, you got a lot of awards and all of that. And I quite like what you said about the use of an award. Okay. I'm not going to say what you said. Right?
How?
Do you think it matters?
It does.
Okay. And how does it matter?
It does. Also, it matters who gave you the award. If it's coming from a peer, it's very valued. If it comes from an organization that you yourself like, then it's valued. And if it's something which is really one of the biggest whatever in your industry, then of course your ego is like pleased and comforted and oh wow, oh man, look at my work, it's been awarded. But the use that I spoke is very true. Like people around you will look at you with new eyes. Now it's not to satisfy that okay, everybody should look at me with new eyes, but then your work becomes easier. So you may be a novice in that space like I was in radio. I really was a person who was not very sure if I'll last beyond 6 months. I'll probably come up on radio and say, hey guys, it was nice to know you. I've run out of things to say. 4 hours every day on prime time was the show. Of course, there was music, there was ads. But once the award came, it was like your management and your boss saying, chalo, theek hai, let her do her thing. There's not much of questioning and oh, will this work? Oh, will this fly or not going? So it just, a good award is like a wonderful lubricant. It just makes your journey thereon a lot more smooth.
So much easier.
I recommend that everybody get an award for them.
The question that came up to me when I heard you say that your bosses allow you to do what you think is right. They don't question you too much.
Clearly, my bosses weren't reading that article, so I'm glad. Or I have ex-former bosses here.
So the question that came up was that, in psychology, one of the things that we say is that anything that is said or done is said for the good of the sayer or the doer. So right now, I'm sitting here talking to you for my benefit. You're sitting here talking to me for your benefit. That's the premise. So if your bosses were, let's say, not allowing you to do what you thought was right, they were probably doing it for their good or the greater good. Which brings me to the question that I actually want to ask you. Who decides what's good and who decides what's not?
The good that the boss thought was also good enough. The good that you think was good for the show is fair and legit because you are looking at the same audience from a different or dusra wala chashma pehen ke. The clash happens between probably that boss is good and you're good. If you really want to win that battle because you think that this is how it should be, then that's the award that's making it happen.
Okay. The other thing,
Of course, to qualify what you're saying, I mean, this was in the context of what you said, I had said about the award. But you see, ultimately, I believe that whoever, at whichever position in the organization, is definitely, I mean, Swartha Mirakalam, whatever can be possible, but overall you want good for the organization or the state or the country or whatever it is, right? But the roots and the means to that are the whole clashing points. Yeah, so that's exactly why it's so subjective. So we cannot really agree upon, yeah.
one of the things that I think is your strength is the ability to strike a rapport. Like your cabbie conversations and all of that. I've followed that.
Thank you.
Right? What makes it easy for you? And I'm not going to let you get away with saying that, this is what Padmini Pati taught me. This is what my mother taught me. No, I want you to intellectualize it so that somebody watching this, right, if they're having that as a challenge, what would you say would be, let's say, 1, 2, or 3 things that they can do to make their lives a little simpler?
I can answer that without invoking my dear grandmother, which is, and I have spoken about this. I have spoken about this in fora, saying that it can actually be templatized. Now, extrovertness is overrated.
Yeah.
People think that if you are a outgoing personality, then good for you. I agree. I concede it's a lot easier than somebody who just thinks, but the question is being asked of me because there is a certain innate desire saying that, hey, how do you strike that? I want to try that. So I always say that, करके तो देखो ना यार.
Yeah.
अब उसके लिए 2-3 step है. एक तो ये, have a starter question. Like you step into a cab or a bus, and then you say that, kaha ke aap? Or the equivalent in regional languages, if it's Tamil Nadu, Kerala, whatever. In Indore, I remember, a cab driver who was literally end of day work. And apparently he was about to switch off his Uber meter. But he just some part of his humanity, he said, "Mujhe pata nahi kyun laga ki you are not from this place," because he just saw the name flashing. I don't know what it was. He said that I thought, okay, let me do your one duty and then I will close for the day. So he would not have come for me. But then later on he said he did. And then it so happened that, let's say my asking these 3 questions, which is what probably people who are watching this and want to this thing, is that, what's your hometown? Kahan ke aap? Like, and the hometown and language are like, I guarantee you, 99% success rate. Unless, of course, that person has had a really, really bad day and just doesn't want to have anything.
Yeah.
Or at least for the sake of saying that, or this thing gives you a segue and way into that other conversation.
Absolutely.
So if you start off with this sort of an icebreaker, which you can have these questions, then the second step you go to is that, who's in your family? Kaun hai? Because see, we are lucky that we don't get thalbed when we ask this question in India. No, in West, somebody might sue us for privacy infringement.
Yeah.
But I said, oh, okay. And then the moment they say that, okay, my sister is there. In fact, I met somebody in Chennai 3 weeks back, a guy called Muruga. Ultimately, we became such friends that he sends me now a daily WhatsApp message, and I see that his WhatsApp name is Bullet Muruga. So I will show you right after the show. Bullet Muruga sends some, and he was so thrilled to be even asked. This is 5 a.m. Like the train just got off, and the same starter. It was no special equipment. Saying that, so I just said, "Do you want to have coffee?" Because this was morning. Yeah. It's 5 o'clock. So I just told him like a disclaimer. I said, if you want to have coffee and stop somewhere, I can wait. So till such point of time, he was a kind of preoccupied young person, looked early 20s and thing. Then suddenly, something in him melted. Like he's like suddenly just almost like took a, who is this passenger man? So you can choose your own second path, whether you want to if you think, okay, there are some people who believe in this theory, and this is very crass. I've found a lot of people, even in my own friend circle, otherwise good human beings, who will say equivalent of, ಯಾರು ಎಲ್ಲಿರ್ಬೇಕೋ ಇಡಬೇಕೋ ಅವರನ್ನ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇಡಬೇಕು. Now, this for non-Kannadigas mean that where you have to keep some people, you have to keep those people there, right? And sometimes I've just sealed my lips and said, okay, just shut up.
It makes me shudder.
Yes, right? But not everybody is like that. They just say that, okay, they must have had a hard day too. So you choose your question if you really want to offer that person coffee or whatever. And invariably, you will end up having, let's say, in a coffee shack. And in this case, he was so protective for God knows what. He actually said he went and parked the auto a little further and got me my tea inside the auto because he said, we don't gents among it. So that is you're instantly striking something much larger than this thing. He also gave me a whole revenue model of what it means to be an auto driver in Chennai. How much per day he manages to have this many trips, and on a bad day he has 4,000 rupees per month, something. Now, if you don't ask all this, or if your conversation doesn't lead to it, your life is not going to come to a stop.
Correct.
But if you do manage to get into that shows off, or into the life of, or at least in the interest zone of that person, then you have gained. It's a choice. If you don't want,
absolutely. No,
but it's doable. That's all.
My coach told me this. He conducts something called the communication workshop. He says, to be interesting, be interested.
Yeah.
And I always, when I say good morning or good afternoon, namaste, whatever it is, and I ask them, where are you from? Simply. And sometimes I sense that there is a certain breaking of that ice immediately. And then I say, you know what? Do whatever you have to do. These are my requirements. I trust you, which is why I'm sitting in the car. But my body doesn't react very well to sudden breaks, so please, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think what you said in terms of dealing with them as a human being to a human being,
Yeah.
relatedness as a human being to a human being, I think makes the greatest amount of sense.
Yeah. And I think that this has to come organically. Like any number of times I've shared also on my posts about meeting people in the Bangalore metro, people who just frisk you, Like for them, you are probably the 1017th person, and you can't expect them to be like standing in attention and doing this. So many times when we're coming back on the last scene after watching a play in Rangashankara, and then that lady said, and they're probably so tired and exhausted, she did this. And I said, Namaste, uta aita. That's it. 3 words. Have you had your dinner? One of the most beautiful, radiant smiles. Ayyo, sustagoytu madam, eshto jana. That's it. And then it was not like she expects you to solve her life problems.
Correct.
But it is just that, God, somebody acknowledged.
I see you.
Yeah.
I see you. I see you. I see you.
And then when I put that picture out, and then I told her, I said, it's okay, no? Like, because and she was looking very beautiful. She was having earrings on top of her trousers and shirt. Mm-hmm. You don't expect jumki kind of thing. But clearly there was some function going on in her house. So now that's literally like a story that you can see within unfolding in reel or Polaroid.
Yeah.
So I just told her, I said, you are looking lovely. If you don't mind, and you can say no, beda andre, you can say no. And then she said this thing. So she, in that picture, this thing, and she's putting her hands around me like this, and both of us this thing, she with her jumki and me with my sari, and this thing. And so when we put that out in the story, some of them were like, they were, oh, how nice of you. And I'm saying, please, sorry, this is not what I'm looking at. No, I'm not saying that. Yeah. This is just probably to give you a little nudge that you could have probably passed by the same lady in JP Nagar Metro.
Noticed.
And probably not noticed. Not a crime.
Yeah.
But she felt good.
Yeah.
Which is the more important part.
Absolutely. I'm going to take a rain check from you. That I'm going to get you back in. I have somebody else in mind. I'd like to do a joint podcast.
Good Lord, I thought I had finished saying this is the same feeling I had on radio. That I've shared everything that I
not at all.
know and
we haven't even scratched the surface. There is so much more to do, and I'm going to take the train check.
Yeah, but you see, when you said what is the message you said, right? I think do some exercise, like physical exercise.
Can you also give a message to Bangalore Metro users to be more considerate of others?
Bangalore Metro is a real gentle piece compared to Delhi Metro.
No. I don't travel in Delhi Metro. I travel in Bangalore Metro. So, would you have a message for?
No, I'll tell you. Since you're asking me message giving after that, I would rather give this message to those who, and this is genuinely painful.
Yeah.
Is it please don't use those micro thin plastics for heaven's sake when you can have a nice good cloth bag. Beautiful bags. There are people who give you bags in weddings and still people will go and get their tarkari and all that in this thing. That gives me a lot of unhappiness. That is unhappiness helix.
Correct.
Yeah. And the other unhappiness helix is just, believing that the world belongs to only you and just nobody else. And then this sort of aggro, that is unhappiness.
Correct.
We should really do a thing on unhappiness, Felix.
Yeah. I think, which is why I said, what? A very small percentage of people resonate with the happiness helix. A lot of them resonate with the unhappiness slide. So I think we should talk about that as well another day.
All right.
Thank you very much, Vasanthi. Extremely. And, my friend Venkat was a little concerned that, I wouldn't let people talk. I'm going to tell him to watch this episode and say that.
I get the hint of what you're trying to do.
You're supposed to talk. I'm not supposed to talk. I'm supposed to ask intelligent questions, which he thinks I'm incapable of.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully he'll think that, thanks to your answers, that he'll think my questions.
Did I just make you feel good?
Absolutely,
Yeah?
you did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I hope all of this.
That leaves me with a very happy feeling, and I think that's a desired outcome of this podcast that you have set out to do. I would just say, whether you call it message or not, just travel, just be, just probably don't put yourselves in only fancy resorts and simulated environments. There's just a lot more to India. You just have to step out of and go and have food as it's meant to have locally. Of course, you can keep your core preferences in place and just go talk to people. Just be yenchai. That's
Yenchai, take what life gives.
Yes.
I think that's a lovely way to end this. Thank you very much, Vasanthi.
Thank you.
And I'll also thank Sriram for this introduction to Vasanthi. Thank you, Datambi.
Thank you, Sriram.